Hello and happy Thursday. Welcome to this Purse Strings Lunch and Learn. My name is Maggie Nielsen and I'm a partner here at Purse Strings. We come into this group about every other week, providing tips, tricks, pieces of advice, all about our finances to help women be financially fearless. So when you're ready to so we can all learn. And then when you're ready to go and get a will, get a trust, start investing, make a plan for paying down debt, buy a house, sell a house, whatever financial transition or transaction you're preparing for, we have top tier financial professionals willing, ready, and able to help you. We call them our Purse Strings approved professionals, and Miri Upton is one of them. So we're so excited to have her on today to talk about having a family meeting and the goal this year of having a family meeting. But before we dive into all of that fun, Miri, could you give us a little intro of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Maggie. So I am Miri Upton. I own Synergia Financial Group. I'm an independent behavioral financial advisor. So I look at planning from a little bit of a different perspective. I look at, we talk about the traditional aspects of, where you are today, where you want to be, how we're going to get there. But I look at it from the standpoint of really what's holding you back, what's making you nervous, how are we going to overcome the fears that you have about talking about whatever it is that we're planning for. So with my degree in psychology and spending the last almost 20 years in this industry, it's really helped me help my clients have a more positive relationship with their finances. And that's the ultimate goal, whether they're young and starting out or in the prime of their lives and having families and moving into retirement and all of the years that come into retirement. So that's really what I do in a nutshell. And I'm so happy to be here today.
Well, we're so excited to have you on, and I was excited when you brought this topic of a family meeting to the table because it's not something we talk about all the time. Before we dive into all of that fun, we just want to throw a quick compliance on the screen to protect Miri and just to state that, everything in here are just, always talk to a professional. I guess that's what I would say.
Exactly. I don't do any tax or legal advice. That I refer on to the professionals that I work with or my client works with. So
awesome. Yep. We've realized that everyone staying in their lane is kind of best. We'll let the tax people do the taxes. We'll let you do the finances. But today we're going to talk about a family meeting. So just to get started, what the heck is a family meeting?
So a family meeting, it could be really, it's anything. It's a time to get together with your family, usually, and it's the best to be done before there's an emergency. When things are going haywire or someone is in some kind of situation, that's a time that you might have to have family meeting. But really, a family meeting is a time to get together as a group, whether it's all family members, whether it's family members and some of your trusted professionals, whomever it is, you're getting together to talk about the topics that are important to you from a financial standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from a medical standpoint. So it's kind of that meeting that, we talk about their wills and their trusts and power of attorney and healthcare proxies and anything that is in someone's financial life and well-being. So it could be, for example, if you're single and you don't necessarily have a family, so you have a conversation, whether it's with your parents or grandparents or siblings or, close friends, so that if something does happen, they know what your wishes are and they know how to handle what needs to be handled and see where everything is.
And so what are some of the topics that you recommend being discussed at some of these meetings? I know you mentioned some of those paperworks and things like that. So what would some of these topics be?
So a lot of times, the topics could be really like what's important to you at that time. If it's a young family, well, what's going to happen if, God forbid, the parents pass away? Where are the kids going to go? How is that all going to be handled? If it's, somewhere where, we hear all the time, the sandwich generation. And that generation, I think, is getting wider and wider because
Yep.
people are living longer. There's now, 3 to 4 generations, as a family unit. So if parents are getting older, what's going to happen if someone needs additional care, or if, let's say, they can't drive but they don't live close by? It's all of those. It really could be anything. Years ago, I had an experience where we had everything done with the parents. They were doing some trust work, and unfortunately the dad had a stroke, obviously unexpected. And we knew as his advisors what the plan was. So when his son called us and said, hey, we had a situation, here's what's going on, we knew what was going on behind the scenes. So we were able to work with them to say, okay, here's what needs to get done so that we can move forward. And it was
Mm,
one of those things where, as much as they were in a tough situation, because it was obviously a catastrophic, uh, you know, issue,
yeah.
we got everything in play for them, and we were able to move forward to help them with the ease of transition, as he was recovering. So,
Right.
it really could be, you know, it could be even, having a conversation with young kids about, hey, this is what we're going to do, like, for our family vacation. Just having, opening up and having dialogue, I think, is the best thing that all of us can do. So,
And so, like, some of those things, we say, like, get a will, get a trust, a healthcare power of attorney, and a financial power of attorney. And so, some of those things are okay. So, great job, you filled out those papers. I think it would be, tell those people that they are your healthcare power of attorney. Tell them you're the financial power of attorney. Tell them where these papers are, because otherwise they're no good, right?
exactly, exactly. And it's not that they're no good, but if someone doesn't know how to locate them or they don't have access to them, it's, you're already in a crisis mode and situation. To
Right.
add more stress to what's going on, I don't think anyone wants to do that to their family.
Right.
So to be proactive is the best and easiest way to do things. I tell my families all the time, you don't need to disclose what the assets are. You don't need to, no one needs to know how much. They just need to know where it is and how they can get it.
Right. And who that professional might be that they want to call, and have that written down somewhere, whether that be, the name of your financial advisor, or your attorney, or, whoever's kind of housing those assets. Um, I know Barb and I have heard some stories about people who, they have their husband die and they're digging through all this paperwork to see if there is a life insurance policy. Um, Nobody wants to be digging through a desk at that time to see if it's there, if it's active, has it been paid. Have these if you had this conversation, you would kind of know what's going on.
Totally, totally. Yeah. And a lot of times, people are nervous to talk about it because, who wants to talk about, like, dying or getting sick? And no one wants to talk about it. It's such a taboo topic, but it's
Hmm.
really so important for us, just as professionals, but even as individuals and family members. It's not the worst thing in the world to talk about, because once you've had the conversation, once you're like, oh, okay, so we had it, it was kind of hard to kind of get it going, but once we were done and through, it was like, oh, okay, so we can do this again. And I think that, there should be a family meeting at least once a year,
Okay.
just to make sure, has anything changed? Are there any updates that need to be made? When kids get older, the parents should change the will, because, when a kid is 35, they don't need to be left to anyone. But
What?
some things, I know. Can you imagine? It depends, unless you really like that person. But, truthfully, things change throughout the years. So to make sure that you're having the conversations and looking at everything that you have, you know, have things changed. Big thing is, oh, so many people are into, like, philanthropy.
Hmm.
So have the charities that you want to donate to, have they changed? Are there any additional benefits, um, donating to an organization, while you're living versus after you pass? Those are all things that to take into account. So it's really important to just really keep that dialogue going once it's started.
And I think, like you said, sometimes starting is the hardest part because, almost if we talk about death or getting ill, we're going to jinx it, or something like that. And so, do you have any tips on how to kind of open this conversation? Because I know sometimes we have family members who are a little bit more standoffish in this viewpoint, or I know sometimes the parent doesn't like to share all this information because they don't want to start being parented by their child. That relationship switch is a little difficult for them to handle.
Right, exactly. So I think the biggest hurdle, like you said, is to just start the conversation, and you start it really gingerly and say, look, here's what we're looking to do. We're not looking to take over anything. We're not looking to have you divulge, all of your assets. We just want to make sure that if something happens, you know, if both parents are still alive, we want to make sure that, the other parent isn't, again, like you said, if someone passes and no one knows if there's life insurance policy, you don't want to have that worry and that fear of, I've now, like, I've lost my spouse. I don't know what's going on. I know there's going to be a lot of expenses, with a
Mhm.
funeral and potentially with an estate. So to just open up that dialogue and say, this is the reason that I want to have the conversation. I want to have it so I know we're prepared if something happens, and to keep us organized so
Right,
that it's not, you know, putting out a fire every other second.
right, right. And I feel like part of this is also having everything in one spot. I
Right.
know we always recommend like a fireproof box or a fireproof folder that has all the paperwork, in the back of the closet or in the underwear drawer, wherever it is, but that it's protected and that people know where it is.
Exactly, 100%. I'm a firm believer in still keeping things on paper.
Hmm.
Electronic documents are amazing and great, but if a computer is locked or something is wrong, at least if you have that physical piece of paper, you're able to say, okay, here's where everything is.
Right.
Um, the fireproof box, 100%, yes. You know, is it really, they're fireproof and waterproof to a certain degree, but again, it's having that safety, and the likelihood of your house having a fire is probably slim to none.
Right.
And the other thing that I always tell people is, if you do have a safe deposit box, you need to have multiple signers on it, because if, you know, one person's a signer and they pass away, and that's where all of the documents are, you can't get into the safe deposit box. Power of
Right.
attorney doesn't work when someone passes.
Hmm.
It's done. Um, so you need to be able to make sure that someone does have access to what needs to be accessible.
It's
So
always
yeah.
this fine line of making sure we're really protected, but sharing it with enough trusted people so it's not too locked down. It's always this interesting balance to me because you don't want to end up, you did all this work and then you're the only one who knows about it. But you don't want to share it with everybody you've ever met, because it's still private information.
Right. Right. Exactly. But again, if you have a family dynamic where you can trust one another, then
Hmm.
of course, let them know where everything is. If you don't, then have a trusted friend, someone that you really can trust, that will say, okay, here I'm going to be taking care of this.
Yeah.
And again, it's hard with family dynamics, and we see it within our own families, just personally, but also, working with families, for all of these years, you definitely see the dynamics of, who's got the strong point in this area and who's strong in this area. So it doesn't have to be one person, kind of maintaining the control,
Right.
but if everyone kind of knows what's going on, and again, feelings come into play, no one wants to be left out. But it's, again, how much information is going to one person versus another person.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that, yeah,
And I like that you bring in the point that it's not, we always say, talk to your family members, things like this as your family meeting. And it's whoever you decide to be family. If your parents have passed, you don't have kids, it might be your best girlfriend around the corner, or it might be the neighbor, or it might be, whoever is important to you in your life. We all have somebody. And so it doesn't always have to be a sibling, a cousin, a parent, but can be that just your best friend since, eighth grade, whoever it is, it doesn't really matter, as long as it's somebody.
Exactly. And like you'd be surprised where it's like, oh, someone might come to you and be like, hey, can you do this? And it's really, then you have to take, that look in yourself, and it's like, oh, that's a big responsibility. Am I ready to take that on?
Yeah.
And I think that's also really another important thing to think about, when you're talking to your family, of who do you want to be, responsible for making decisions for you?
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to be able to, number one, and again, having everything organized and laid out and spelled out makes
Mm-hmm.
it so much easier for the family members to make and share the decisions when something happens.
Right.
So if
Definitely.
if it's someone who's older, and they're like, well, I really don't want to do that, and it's like, well, but you really should, because it's the one decision that you can help your kids make and them not have to feel guilty for.
Right. Right.
So
And
I think
it's nice as a kid knowing that you're doing what they want. Still listening to your parents' order or whoever that is.
right, exactly. Yeah. And it's listening to their orders, but it's also, from a medical standpoint, if you've never been in that situation where you have to have a conversation of, okay, well, what happens if this happens, and what happens if that happens? It's definitely not an easy conversation to have. And it's, you take a few steps back, and it's like, wow, like I'm in control of a huge part of someone's life right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I had one of these conversations when I got both my financial power of attorney and medical power of attorney, and I chose a different sibling for each one of them. But one of my sisters is a doctor, and so of course I just gave her the medical power of attorney, and she was like, "Oh, yay, thank you," and was excited about it, And I gave my brother the finances, and he was like, "Awesome, I'll take care of that," And they were honored, almost excited, and I was like,
Right.
"Awesome, everyone knows their job, like." Let's keep cooking dinner, and it was just, we are always cooking in our house. So it's just a conversation while doing that. And she's like, kids are going to be yours if anything happens. I was like, all right, I figured, now I know, like, I know that will be my role. And it's just, these conversations where it's like, all right, in the back of my mind, I'm always prepared that would be my role.
Right. Exactly. But again, the fact that you have that, and
Yep.
you have that extra preparation and mindset of, okay, if something were to happen, you do know what's going to happen.
Exactly. It's almost
There's
like
no
making
surprises.
a fire emergency plan. If a fire were to
Right.
come, we're going to go out the window. Here's the ladder. This is the bag you grab, and we're ready to go.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is, yeah. So it's kind of, it's laying out those steps of, here we are, today is that family unit. And if something happens, okay, this person's going to go over here and do this person's going to go over here and do this. And again, to your point of, your sister and your brother, pick people that are capable of doing it.
Yeah.
Don't just pick someone out of, guilt of, well, they're the older one, so they should be doing this. It's like, no, you have to make the decision and say, okay, who's going to be able to make the snap decision, if there needs to be a snap decision,
Right.
without regrets, which I don't even know if that's even possible to do, but and without hesitation. Because, listen, when, if someone's really, really ill and they're going to pass, like, making those decisions, it's still hard to do.
Right.
And it's unfortunately, a necessary evil. But knowing that the person that you pick to make them will be comfortable because you've already
Right.
had that conversation.
And I feel confident in their decision. I knew that was something like I could not leave to a parent to make. I'd be like, they'd be distraught. There's not a chance, my parents can make the right decision in that. I'm not even putting them there, but
Right.
like, we'll let the doctor do it. She's done it before, do it again. You know what I
Right,
mean?
exactly. And it's different when it's your own family,
Yeah.
but like the fact that you've already prepared for
Yep.
some of your stuff going forward, it's huge, and it's a weight lifted off your shoulders, I'm sure.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, like you said, have these conversations. You said annually, at least, is a great, kind of cadence to have these conversations, or if anything really big changes. And just kind of open up the conversation. Like you said, just getting started is usually the hardest part. But once the doors kind of open, that conversation, is much easier to let happen.
Exactly, exactly. And again, if you have kids, obviously everything has to be age appropriate, but even if they're, coming into, young adults or, teenagers, let them be involved. Let them see what it's like to have these healthy conversations. It's
Hmm.
only going to help them grow, and it's only going to help you grow as well with them.
Yeah.
So I'm always open, with my daughter to say, okay, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. Obviously, everything is age appropriate, but from the standpoint of getting her involved in conversations, obviously with what I do, I see, sometimes the not so fun times when things happen, that I'm like, well, she might as well know and kind of understand, so that down the road, if she's having, a conversation with a friend or some kind of conflict, you kind of have that feel and know-how of how to work through it.
Right. These conversations shouldn't be so taboo or so, you know, hush hush, because something's going to happen, I promise you. And so we just do need to have these
Exactly.
conversations. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
this has been a, go ahead.
Now I was going to say, like none of us, we don't have a crystal ball that will tell us exactly when something's going to happen. The magic 8 ball is usually not correct. So to, have all of those things in the back of your head and be prepared, it's the only thing we can really do for ourselves.
Definitely. Definitely. I feel like this has been a lot of great, information today for our community. And a great just like reminder, to keep having these conversations. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure is shared today?
I don't think so. I think, really start the conversation, reach out to your, trusted professionals, rely on them. They've done it.
Yeah.
That's, that's my biggest piece of advice. For those of us in professional environments, we've probably heard it all. And even if you think that something is, crazy or out of the ordinary, just say it, ask it. That, asking questions is not a sign of weakness. It's really a sign of looking to grow, and to be aware. So, never be afraid to ask a question. And if someone, you know, doesn't like the question that you've asked, then take a few steps back and think about, do you want to, work with that person? And whether it be a professional or again a family member as you're going through the family meeting.
Yeah.
So I
Awesome.
think that's the biggest piece of advice is always ask questions.
I love that. I love it. And so, if someone was interested in working with you, what kind of services do you provide, and what does that process kind of look like?
So I provide a whole host of services. So I do a lot of planning, as I had said in the beginning, um, and I really try and help my clients have their relationship with their finances. It's not, it's not a sprint. This is a marathon, and I like to focus on, where they want to be and how we're
Hmm.
going to get there. Um, so a lot of that is, it's done either over the phone or on Zoom or, even in person. Um, but it's everything is built around what that individual client needs. I'm not nothing is cookie cutter. Everything is, kind of individually crafted, for them. And that's how I work, and that's how I love to work. And I really, I love to watch my clients kind of grow through the process. And it's really, they're proactive in the planning process. That's how
Awesome.
that's how I like to have it be. So
Yeah. always like, hounding on that we are all unique. It might seem like we all have the same basic situation, but we really don't. And so, yeah, getting that personalized plan is always super helpful.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
so like I said, Miri is one of our Purse Strings approved professionals. So you could always check her out on our site, pursestrings.co. Also, her email has been going through the bottom. And don't be afraid, give her a call just to have a conversation. I know she has a free, 20 or 30-minute consultation just to make sure it's the right fit. But let's have these family meetings this year. Let's open up these conversations and let's be financially fearless. So thank you again, Miri, for coming on today.
Thank you.
And we hope to talk to everyone again soon. All right, everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.